Are you preparing for the Cyber AB Certified CMMC Assessor, CCA exam? In this video, we'll test your knowledge with Cyber AB Certified CMMC Assessor, CCA, exam practice questions covering CMMC assessment concepts, assessment preparation, evidence, security requirements, findings, and assessor responsibilities. Keep track of your score, and for more practice questions and complete preparation, visit Study for Exam using the link in the description. Let's begin. Question 1. What is the primary purpose of a CMMC assessment? A. To determine whether an organization's applicable cybersecurity requirements are adequately implemented. B. To guarantee that the organization will never experience a cyber attack. C. To replace the organization's cybersecurity team. D. To evaluate employee productivity. Correct answer: A. To determine whether an organization's applicable cybersecurity requirements are adequately implemented. Explanation: a CMMC assessment evaluates whether applicable cybersecurity practices and requirements have been implemented and whether sufficient objective evidence supports the assessment conclusions. Question 2. Before beginning an assessment, what should an assessor primarily establish? A. The assessment scope and applicable requirements. B. The organization's marketing strategy. C. The preferred programming language. D. The employee's vacation schedules. Correct answer: A. The assessment scope and applicable requirements. Explanation: clearly defining the assessment scope and applicable CMMC requirements helps ensure the assessment is focused on the correct assets, systems, practices, and organizational boundaries. Question 3. Why is assessment scope important? A. It identifies the systems, assets, and organizational elements that are subject to the assessment. B. It determines employee salaries. C. It eliminates the need for evidence. D. It guarantees a perfect assessment result. Correct answer: A. It identifies the systems, assets, and organizational elements that are subject to the assessment. Explanation: a well-defined scope helps the assessment team understand what is included and excluded and prevents the assessment from being performed against an unclear or incorrect environment. Question 4. An assessor asks an organization to demonstrate how a security practice is implemented. What is the assessor primarily seeking? A. Objective evidence supporting the assessment conclusion. B. A verbal promise that the practice exists. C. A future implementation plan only. D. A marketing document. Correct answer: A. Objective evidence supporting the assessment conclusion. Explanation: assessors should rely on appropriate evidence to support their conclusions. Evidence can include documentation, interviews, and observations, depending on the requirement and assessment methodology. Question 5. Which combination represents common assessment evidence sources? A. Examination, interviews, and testing/observation activities. B. Advertising, sales reports, and customer reviews. C. Payroll, marketing, and social media posts. D. Employee opinions only. Correct answer: A. Examination, interviews, and testing/observation activities. Explanation: assessment activities can involve examining relevant evidence, interviewing knowledgeable personnel, and testing or observing implementations to determine whether requirements are satisfied. Question 6. During an interview, an employee describes a security process, but the assessor cannot find supporting evidence. What should the assessor do? A. Evaluate the available evidence and perform appropriate additional assessment activities. B. Automatically assume the practice is fully implemented. C. Ignore the interview. D. Mark every requirement as satisfied. Correct answer: A. Evaluate the available evidence and perform appropriate additional assessment activities. Explanation: interviews provide useful information, but assessment conclusions should be supported by appropriate evidence. Additional examination or testing may be necessary. Question 7. An organization has a written security policy, but employees do not follow the required process. What should the assessor consider? A. Whether the practice is actually implemented, not merely documented. B. The policy title only. C. The document's formatting. D. The organization's website design. Correct answer: A. Whether the practice is actually implemented, not merely documented. Explanation: documentation alone does not necessarily demonstrate effective implementation. The assessor should evaluate whether the required practice is actually performed and supported by evidence. Question 8. What should an assessor do when evidence contradicts an organization's initial claim? A. Investigate the discrepancy and determine the appropriate assessment conclusion based on evidence. B. Ignore the contradictory evidence. C. Automatically accept the organization's claim. D. Delete the evidence. Correct answer: A. Investigate the discrepancy and determine the appropriate assessment conclusion based on evidence. Explanation: assessors should objectively evaluate contradictory information and resolve discrepancies through appropriate assessment activities rather than relying on assumptions. Question 9. Why is assessor independence and objectivity important? A. It helps ensure assessment conclusions are based on evidence rather than bias or personal interests. B. It allows assessors to change requirements. C. It eliminates the need for documentation. D. It guarantees that every organization passes. Correct answer: A. It helps ensure assessment conclusions are based on evidence rather than bias or personal interests. Explanation: an assessor should maintain professional objectivity and base conclusions on applicable requirements and sufficient evidence. Question 10. An assessor discovers that a practice is only partially implemented. What should the assessor do? A. Evaluate the implementation against the applicable assessment criteria and document the appropriate finding. B. Automatically mark it fully satisfied. C. Ignore the issue. D. Change the requirement. Correct answer: A. Evaluate the implementation against the applicable assessment criteria and document the appropriate finding. Explanation: partial implementation should be evaluated objectively against the applicable assessment criteria. The resulting conclusion should be supported by documented evidence. Question 11. Why should assessment findings be clearly documented? A. To provide traceability between requirements, evidence, and assessment conclusions. B. To make the assessment longer. C. To replace the assessment scope. D. To hide deficiencies. Correct answer: A. To provide traceability between requirements, evidence, and assessment conclusions. Explanation: clear documentation helps demonstrate how the assessor reached each conclusion and provides an auditable connection between requirements, evidence, and findings. Question 12. An organization provides evidence that is outdated and does not demonstrate the current state of its environment. What should the assessor consider? A. Whether the evidence is relevant and sufficient to support the current assessment. B. Automatically accepting it. C. Ignoring the age of the evidence. D. Assuming the environment has not changed. Correct answer: A. Whether the evidence is relevant and sufficient to support the current assessment. Explanation: evidence should be relevant to the environment being assessed. Outdated evidence may not accurately demonstrate the current implementation. Question 13. What is an important reason to maintain assessment records? A. To support traceability, review, and the defensibility of assessment conclusions. B. To replace cybersecurity controls. C. To guarantee compliance forever. D. To eliminate future assessments. Correct answer: A. To support traceability, review, and the defensibility of assessment conclusions. Explanation: assessment records provide evidence of how the assessment was conducted and how conclusions were reached, supporting accountability and review. Question 14. An assessor identifies a potential deficiency but does not yet have enough information to reach a conclusion. What is the best approach? A. Perform appropriate additional assessment activities before reaching a conclusion. B. Immediately declare the organization non-compliant. C. Ignore the issue. D. Assume the organization passes. Correct answer. A. Perform appropriate additional assessment activities before reaching a conclusion. Explanation. Assessors should gather sufficient and appropriate evidence before making an assessment conclusion. Additional examination, interviews, or testing may be necessary. Question 15. Why should an assessor understand the organization's system boundary? A. It helps determine which systems and components are relevant to the assessment. B. It determines the organization's revenue. C. It eliminates security requirements. D. It identifies employee performance ratings. Correct answer. A. It helps determine which systems and components are relevant to the assessment. Explanation. Understanding system boundaries is essential for determining what assets and components fall within the assessment scope and how relevant security requirements apply. Question 16. An organization claims that a security control is handled entirely by an external service provider. What should the assessor do? A. Determine the applicable responsibilities and obtain appropriate evidence. B. Automatically accept the claim. C. Ignore the service provider. D. Remove the requirement from the assessment. Correct answer. A. Determine the applicable responsibilities and obtain appropriate evidence. Explanation. Third-party services may have security responsibilities, but the assessor must determine how those responsibilities affect the organization's environment and what evidence is necessary.
Question 17. What is the purpose of testing during an assessment? A. To verify whether a security practice or implementation operates as described. B. To redesign the organization's network. C. To replace documentation. D. To increase the organization's cybersecurity budget. Correct answer. A. To verify whether a security practice or implementation operates as described. Explanation. Testing or observation can provide direct evidence about how a security practice operates and whether the implementation supports the assessment conclusion. Question 18. An assessor finds that evidence supports one requirement but does not support another related requirement. What should the assessor do? A. Evaluate each requirement independently against its applicable criteria and evidence. B. Mark both requirements as satisfied automatically. C. Ignore the second requirement. D. Combine unrelated findings. Correct answer. A. Evaluate each requirement independently against its applicable criteria and evidence. Explanation. Evidence should be mapped appropriately to the requirements it actually supports. One piece of evidence does not automatically demonstrate compliance with every related requirement. Question 19. What should an assessor do if an organization attempts to influence the assessment conclusion without providing supporting evidence? A. Maintain objectivity and base the conclusion on applicable criteria and evidence. B. Change the conclusion to satisfy the organization. C. Remove the requirement. D. Accept the organization's request without review. Correct answer. A. Maintain objectivity and base the conclusion on applicable criteria and evidence. Explanation. Professional objectivity is essential. Assessment conclusions should be determined by the applicable requirements and sufficient evidence rather than external pressure. Question 20. What is the best overall approach for conducting a CMMC assessment? A. Define the scope. Understand applicable requirements. Collect sufficient evidence. Perform appropriate assessment activities and document objective conclusions. B. Rely entirely on interviews. C. Accept organizational claims without verification. D. Focus only on cybersecurity policies. Correct answer. A. Define the scope. Understand applicable requirements. Collect sufficient evidence. Perform appropriate assessment activities and document objective conclusions. Explanation. A strong assessment follows a structured and evidence-based approach. The assessor should understand the scope, evaluate applicable requirements, gather and analyze evidence, perform appropriate assessment activities, and document defensible conclusions. Great job completing these Cyber AB certified CMMC Assessor (CCA) exam practice questions. How many did you get right? Share your score in the comments.
For more Cyber AB certified CMMC Assessor (CCA) exam practice questions, detailed explanations, and complete exam preparation, visit Study for Exam using the link in the video description. Thanks for watching. If this video helped with your Cyber AB certified CMMC Assessor (CCA) exam preparation, like, share, and subscribe for more certification practice videos. Keep practicing, stay consistent, and good luck with your exam.